Coming up on show 532, Toyota and BYD join forces, the Chevrolet Corvette could electrify, and Viva Las Vegas for supercharger V3. Those stories and many more coming up on today's programme. We have a new CEO of BMW, GM are failing to impress with the Bolt, and the world's longest EV road trip comes to an end. Well, good morning, good afternoon or good evening wherever you are in the world. Welcome to EV News Daily. It's your edition for the end of the working week, Friday 19th of July. My name is Martyn Lee. What I do is go through every EV story that I can find and try and bring you the last 24 hours worth of EV news in a short podcast. To save you time, I know how busy you are. Welcome to a new producer, John MCCONAGHY. Thank you very much for signing up at producer level on Patreon. You're a good man. Thank you to myev.com for their continued support as we continue to make this show and expand it around the world. I can see the downloads increasing for EV News Daily, so we're spreading the good word about EVs. And in the USA, myev.com are doing their bit to buy and sell, or help you buy and sell, used electric vehicles. Nice new ones are all well and good, but where the real action happens is on the used car markets when so many people get into an EV for the first time that way. Check them out, myev.com. So, what do you do when you are the world's biggest automaker? What do you do when you're the world's largest? As the last time I checked, the 6th biggest company in the world. You join forces with somebody else who is good at making EVs. When you can't do it on your own, or don't want to do it on your own. Let me make sure that I'm careful with what I say there. I'm sure that Toyota could make full electric vehicles on their own, but they're joining forces with BYD, a relative newcomer, a pretty much, in the grand scheme of automakers, a startup, really. They've been around a few years, but nothing compared to the big boys, as you would say. BYD and Toyota announced today the two industry powerhouses have entered into an agreement that will see them partnering on the development of full battery electric vehicles. The batteries themselves will be the foundations of an electrified future for both companies, as the agreement includes provisions to partner on the development of saloon cars and SUVs as well, writes Kyle. Kyle Field for Cleantechnica brings us this report. Well, the new set of vehicles are going to be produced under the Toyota brand, specifically for the Chinese market in the early 2020s. Now, Toyota has set a public target, a promise to sell 50% of its vehicles as electrified by 2025. A couple of big numbers in there. 50% of Toyota vehicles is a massive number. 2025 is not that far away. But the key phrase is electrified, because even the softest of soft hybrids does count towards that. That fuzzy use of electrified allows the company to count its traditional non-plug-in, fossil-fueled powered so-called no such thing as a self-charging hybrid in that number. Boiling it down to hard numbers, Toyota wants to get 15% of its sales from battery electric vehicles on the new platform by 2030. They have a 2050 plan as well. That just seems crazy, doesn't it? We're talking 31 years away. They do have a 2030 plan, a 2050 plan. When you look at it, by the way, though, and they can say big numbers because actually as a proportion of their total output, 15% is still so very low. It means the other 85% you have to go to the petrol pump to make move. Well, to curb global warming, BYD and Toyota want to reduce CO2 emissions, they say in a joint press release that I was sent today, by promoting the widespread use of BEVs. And this is where this announcement does give me some hope, because so many of these large automakers have been, you know, I know the phrase greenwashing is out there, but I wouldn't call it that. And some would say a smokescreen, and I wouldn't call it that. But there's a lot of press releases going on and not too many cars being made. So when I saw this, I immediately thought, well, what are they going to try and get around it with some wordplay? But no, they say battery electric vehicles at the very top of the press release. They are going to join forces on they don't use the word full. I'm adding the word full. Battery electric vehicles. And I think that is the case because when Toyota talk about their cars, they talk about HEVs, HEVs, hybrid electric vehicles. So when you see Toyota use the phrase BEV, I take that as full electric cars. To accomplish the goals, both companies believe there is a need to put aside any rivalry, collaborate together, and the two companies have agreed to jointly develop battery electric vehicles. Is it, in terms of the Japanese culture, I don't know much about Japanese culture, by the way, but is it some sort of admission they couldn't do it on their own by joining up with BYD, a Chinese company that have got them out of the electric car hole, or is this perfectly normal for the auto industry? Collaborations happen all of the time, as we saw recently with VW and Ford collaborating on battery electric vehicles. One thing is for sure, I don't think Toyota, well, maybe it's because of the scale of just being the biggest automaker in the world, that all the bits of it are fully joined up yet, because in this country, Toyota have an advertising campaign that says we choose not to plug in. They go really, really big on the fact that EVs are a pain in your backside because you've got to plug them into the wall, and that their answer to the future of motoring is to be petrol-powered hybrid cars. They call them self-charging, but you and I know there's no such thing as a self-charging hybrid. So that's what they do. And they're spending so much money. And I've seen the ads crop up in America on YouTube as well. I've seen the US blogs that I follow talk about this. So I know it's not just this country. Their phrase, we choose not to plug in. They're spending so much money on that. At some point, the company's going to have to go, oh, yeah, you know what? Funny story. Didn't mean it. We choose to plug in. Yeah, okay, look, we choose to plug in. They're going to have to. All companies are. So at what point do they drop this crazy advertising campaign of we choose not to plug in? Or do they take us for mugs? Do they think that they can run an advertising campaign in one country or even one continent, and then somehow we're all living in some sort of weird 1970s world before the internet, or where we were going down the shop in the morning to pick up our newspaper and relying on that, where they could control through the control of PR and relationships with motoring journalists back in the day, they could control the dissemination of information. It just doesn't exist in a 2019 world. Something happens in one part of the world, and seconds later, on the other side of the world, everyone knows about it. So you have to come clean. Companies now, if they're operating on a global scale, have to be transparent and honest. And those companies, in my opinion, what do I know? Those companies that do treat their customers with respect and honesty and openness, and when they screw up, they say, hey, we screwed up. Those are the ones I think will be a success going forward. The companies that want to sell battery electric vehicles in one country whilst running an advertising campaign in another going, hey, we choose not to plug in because full plug-ins are crud. And yet, at the same time, telling a whole country and saying to China, hey, buy our full battery electric vehicles, the discord in there, the clear lack of a consistent message, the cognitive dissonance. You know what I'm saying? When you have that feeling where you feel just uneasy and something in your gut tells you this isn't right. No, step back from this. I don't like it. Let's not go down that road. It's cognitive dissonance, where you have a kind of mental discomfort where you're feeling two things at the same time, where you see two different messages. How can one company believe two things at once? They don't. They're trying to sell you cars. And I just wish that, I'm not asking for all companies to have some sort of mission statement to save the world and all those kind of things, but at least do one thing, say one thing, and have that conviction. Anyway, right, off my high horse now. Good luck to everyone at Toyota. Like I say, they must be doing something right, world's biggest automaker, and so good luck to them. I'll pop links to those articles and even to the Global Toyota press room on the show notes if you want to read more for yourself in their own words. Well, Tesla's released its vehicle safety report for the second quarter of 2019, and similar to previous quarters, the report showed Teslas operating on autopilot are far less likely to meet accidents on the road compared to vehicles operating without the driver assist system enabled. Tesla's report this quarter also included some stats on vehicle fires, and that's for the very first time, says Simon at Teslarati. Tesla's data shows that between 2012 and 2018, there was one Tesla fire for every 170 million miles travelled. Considering that the National Fire Protection Association, the NFPA of the US Department of Transportation, they record a vehicle fire every 19 million miles travelled. Well, Tesla's figures make very clear that electric cars are over 8 times less likely to be involved in any kind of fire, because Tesla's data includes all incidents resulting from structural fires, from arson, from other factors completely unrelated to the vehicle themselves have been rolled up into Tesla's numbers. Also, the stats they have on the safety of autopilot being turned on and how many millions of miles travelled. It's far safer to have autopilot turned on and driver assist features compared to the national average. It really is a no-brainer. The car of the moment, the car of the last 24 hours, has to be the Chevrolet Corvette C8. I even posted a picture of it on my Twitter last night because I saw a picture of the inside of the car, the reveal. The auto blogs around the world have gone loopy for this. The inside of it, though, my goodness me, it looks like mission control, like an aircraft cockpit. There's so many buttons. I tried to count them all, but the picture wasn't high resolution enough. It was so many buttons. It's literally the polar opposite of the Tesla Model 3 with its single screen. Not that I think that's the perfect answer, by the way. I like a good old button or a knob for climate control. Heating, cooling, HVAC as you might call it, that I want absolutely to hand. There's nothing wrong with a good old-fashioned control for things like that. You can go over the top with putting everything on one single screen. But the Chevrolet Corvette C8's debut only a few hours ago, speculation's already swirling around the vehicle's future that could include a variety of forms of electrification. When asked by Autocar about whether their mid-engined Corvette could use an integrated starter-generator motor for a mild hybrid system, or a dedicated EV motor driving the front axle with the fossil gobbler driving the rear axle, a member of the Corvette team told Autocar, "You'd look stupid. You would not look stupid if you said that." So they were trying to deflect the question by agreeing with it. According to Chris Bruce for Motor1.com, 4 years ago, General Motors registered a trademark for the Corvette E-Ray, and the company just renewed that application into 2019 as well. Rumours suggest that the automaker might be reserving the moniker for a hybrid Corvette in the future. Oliver Zips will take the lead at BMW in a few days' time. 16th of August, he takes the lead, a new CEO for BMW. The board just decided with Harald Krüger leaving. The German carmaker will have much to do to catch up on electric mobility, says the industry website electrive.com. Now, when Krüger took over as chairman of the board of management in 2015, the group had an innovative electric car on offer, the BMW i3. Their local competition had nothing that touched it, and for a very long time they didn't. 2015 was a turning point for the BMW i electric division. At the time it was led by Herbert Diess. He now runs VW, if you've heard me talk about him on the podcast before. Then he was the board member for development and had made a decisive contribution to electric mobility at BMW. Really many people credit him with much of the success of the BMW i3 and the i8s. During his time as board member for purchasing, he strengthened the BMW i team. Now, after his defeat, there was a duel to be the head of BMW, and he lost out at the top of the board, so he left the company, and he went to Volkswagen. The upcoming electric vehicle offensive at Volkswagen now bears his name to a large extent, with the ID.3 and the MEB platform that is going to proliferate across the VW brand. Meanwhile, where is BMW? Still falling behind. And the more it happens, the more you realise how far ahead the i3 was for its time. And the more they talk about not replacing the i3 directly, they talk very fondly about the iX3, which of course is just an SUV, a fossil SUV with an electric powertrain. They talk about the i4, the iNext. The longer they wait, and they're confirming that the i3 won't get a direct replacement, that i3 becomes a collector's item. In 20, 30 years' time, people will look at the i3. They'll look back the way that you look at classic cars now that were groundbreaking. In fact, the i3 is such a desirable car. The fact that it's not being updated or replaced now, I think it already puts it so far ahead of so many other cars. I don't think people in many years' time will want to hunt down a Toyota Prius, but they will certainly want to have an i3 in their collection, because it's space-age technology still, but it redefined so much for BMW at the time, and they've really lost their way now. It's fascinating to watch. They've got to bring it back. Well, not long ago, Tesla unveiled their V3 supercharger technology that's capable of delivering 250 kilowatts of power. That's 180 miles of range in 15 minutes. It's 1,000 miles an hour when it's at full whack. Since then, the automaker has added V3 superchargers to existing stations. However, its first brand new V3 supercharging station just went live, says Inside EVs. The Las Vegas Tesla charging station has a total of 39 chargers. 25 of those actually are V3 superchargers. I know. And there's 24 of them actually are the V3s. They don't just do one or two here and there. They've put 24 of them in. The site has then got 15 extra level 2 wall connectors for those who are going to leave their car charging for longer periods of time. Tesla says the new site generates power through their solar canopy. So the generating is done by the Tesla solar panels, and then it's stored in Tesla power packs located on site. This station in Las Vegas, Viva Las Vegas, is the ultimate, really, Tesla supercharging station. Generated by solar, stored in power packs, and then pumped into your Tesla for some clean, green solar miles. Moving on to GM and the Bolt. In keeping with updates to the 2018 and 2019 model years, the Chevy Bolt 2020 receives a couple of really minor colour changes and feature adjustments. The cameras, the reversing camera, is a little bit better. There's really not much else for me to talk about with this. If the consumer-facing updates match those listed on the fleet ordering guide, which has been leaked now, buying a Bolt EV in 2020 is going to look pretty much the same as buying a Bolt now, says Talk News. While it doesn't come as a surprise, they say that GM has stuck with the same battery pack at the early stages of its EV development. It's disappointing. There's no software tweaks to enable longer fast charging. Maximum rate is still 55 kilowatts. There's no better control over thermal management. Battery conditioning, that would be interesting for current Bolt owners, some of whom are going to be coming up to the end of 3-year leases next year and looking for reasons to stick with the vehicle. And at the moment, looking at next year's spec sheet for the 2020 model year Bolt, there's nothing really new. They could buy another car, but it'll be pretty much the same as the one they've had for the last 3 years on a lease. Couple of things here that I will chip in with my thoughts, and always feel free to tell me I'm wrong and bang out of order. Could it mean that GM are bringing a new vehicle to market? So rather than say, hey, we've got these extra updates for the Bolt, it'll like a bit like the Mercedes and the Teslas. It'll precondition the battery if you set it to navigate to a charging station, or it'll do this, or we're going to give it some extra updates. If all those things aren't happening, could it mean that they're silently just pausing development on this and busy working on a completely new car? Just a thought. I'll throw it out there. If they're not, you got some Bolt owners in 3 years that might be looking for a change next year, coming to the end of their lease, who might be thinking, well, what else is out there? Are they being given a reason to look around and try other things? Hey, whilst I've got you, by the way, thank you so much if you've left a review for this podcast. Hello to Gerry, who listens in this country on Apple Podcasts. He left me a review saying, always relevant news presented in a professional, relaxed and almost radio show manner. Funny that. Informative to the end and educated me before I got my first EV. Brilliant, thanks Gerry. And hello to Willow's Broom, who says, I love this podcast for its diverse guests and the up-to-minute news and the quote, there's no such thing as a self-charging hybrid. If you have an interest in EVs or curious, this is the podcast to listen to. Yes, funny you mentioned guests, by the way, because tomorrow on the Saturday special, a brilliant guest all about EVs and data. I think you'll learn a lot, because I learned a ton when I interviewed her. Okay, let's move on to Hyundai. Now, Hyundai Motor or Hyundai Motor, however you want me to say it, considering producing 46,000 units of the Kona electric at its Czech plant next year. Industry sources revealed today. The volume is equal to the pretty much 48,000 units produced at the company's Ulsan plant this year, says the Korean news site I found called Business Korea. Well, currently, the Korean car maker produces all of its EVs for experts at the Ulsan and Asan factories in Korea, except those that are currently made in China. Accordingly, if mass production of the Kona electric begins on this continent in the Czech next year, it'll be Hyundai's first electric car, green car, ever produced overseas, and it could certainly help the supply chain of producing more electric Konas, because we just can't get one without a ridiculously long wait time in this country. And finally, a Dutch sustainability advocate who you may have heard of has just completed his longest ever journey in an EV in New Zealand. After a 3-year drive that took him through more than 30 countries, according to a Reuters report today, Wiebe Wacker set off from the Netherlands in March 2016 in the Blue Bandit. I'm sure you've seen the Blue Bandit online. If not, go and look on YouTube. It's a fantastic story he's got to tell to showcase the potential of sustainable transport funded by donations from those following his trip on social media. He drove for 62,800 miles, and it took Wiebe through Eastern Europe, Iran, India, Southeast Asia, travelled around Australia and across to New Zealand. He gave regular updates on his blog and social media through the journey, and he detailed visiting Iran's biggest car manufacturer in Tehran, a breakdown of the Indonesian island of Java. He took to Australia's outback and the world-famous Uluru. The drive has relied on the support of strangers across the world who offered him food, a place to stay, and somewhere to plug his car in. How funny. This story comes just one day after on the podcast I told you that Toyota gave a presentation in London saying that EVs were challenged because of infrastructure. And yet, here is Weber travelling around the world and plugging in his EV after 101,000 kilometres. Doesn't sound to me like there's a shortage of electricity on the planet. I'll put a link in the show notes, and if you follow him on socials, just pop him a little message to say massive congratulations. Well, thanks to myev.com for setting our question of the week this week. What do you reckon of this? Should all chargers be open to everyone, or is it okay to have walled gardens? Let me know your thoughts. Email hello@evnewsdaily.com or drop by Facebook and YouTube and leave me a little comment. Well, John's support makes us 237 patrons of the podcast. You can find out what it's all about, patreon.com/evnewsdaily. Our premium partners are Phil Roberts and the gang at Electric Future, doing those big solar and storage installations here in the UK. Hello to Brad Crosby and the gang at Avid Technology. If you want to, you can get any one of the previous 532 shows online for free. Get the new shows first and free and automatically by hitting the subscribe button in your podcast app. Hey, can you do me a favour? Can you share this podcast with someone, somewhere, somehow? I don't know. You must know someone, a forum or a social media account that you've got where you can promote this podcast. You know how desperate I am to spread the word about EVs and clean air. Do me a favour, pass it on. If you want to say hi on the socials, search EV News Daily. Have a wonderful day. I'll catch you tomorrow. And remember, wherever you are in the world, there's no such thing as a self-charging hybrid.